Hello, I'm Gavin Horgan, Headmaster of Millfield School in Somerset, the largest co-educational boarding school in the UK. Welcome to the Millfield Way podcast. Here, you'll hear from teachers, coaches and students from Millfield and Millfield Prep School. Millfield is traditionally different, and this is the Millfield Way.
Hello and welcome to this Millfield Way podcast, where we are going to explore in depth Millfield's Brilliance Curriculum. My name's Liz Webb and I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Adam Gutteridge, Assistant Head Academic at Millfield, Mark Nash, Head of Languages at Millfield, and Andrew Sweet, Head of Humanities at Millfield Prep. Good afternoon, everyone.
Afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So let's set the scene by finding out a bit more about each of your roles in the school. Could you give us a brief introduction about yourself, starting with you, Adam?
Hi, my name's Adam. I'm the Assistant Head Academic here. I teach the A-level philosophy, which is a lot of fun. I enjoy that enormously. My background, though, and I explain this because it'll have a bearing on what we're talking about today, is very interdisciplinary. I got a PhD in archaeology. I've taught history at universities. So I really like that interdisciplinary thing. And I've been here 3 years now, and I'm really enjoying myself.
Excellent. And Mark, a bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm Head of Languages and I teach Spanish, and I'm also a Senior HOD, where we one of the things I help with is the Brilliance Curriculum. I've been here for 7 years, and I also help in boarding and do some sports coaching as well.
Fantastic. And Andrew?
Hi, I'm Head of Humanities at Millfield Prep School. I've been teaching for about 22 years now, 5 of which have been at Millfield, and part of my role is chairing the Teaching and Learning Working Party at the school.
Excellent. So we're here to talk about the Brilliance Curriculum. Could you give us a brief overview of what the Brilliance Curriculum is and what the overarching idea and ethos behind it is?
Yeah, I'll start. There are lots of ideas and lots of different ethoses behind it. I think probably the most important thing for us to think about in order to introduce it is to explain our thinking about its construction. So we thought about 2 things. We thought about things on a vertical level and we thought about things on a horizontal level. What we want to do is to think about the substance of what young people are taught in a classroom, and to make sure that they're ordered and delivered in a really specifically designed way. That the way in which our lessons are structured and the way in which what we call a curriculum, so how things, what lessons are delivered when, this isn't just haphazard. This isn't just the result even of convenience. But more importantly, what it is the result of careful, sustained thought. On one level, we need to think vertically. So we need to imagine for a year 7 at the prep, a year 9 at Millfield, children in their GCSE and their A-level and BTEC years. We need to think about what they would need to know to study that subject at university. What's a kind of like vertical ladder that they would climb, and make sure that at every level, at every stage, from the prep through to the senior school, what they're receiving is the very best foundational bedrocks that will allow them to reach the pinnacle. So we're always thinking, what does this subject look like at the highest academic level? But then also at the same time, we're thinking about things horizontally. Now, we know as people who work in education that what we call the disciplines, so history, geography, French, philosophy, that they're a relic of Victorian era compartmentalizations of a tremendously complex world. So they're attempts to simplify and codify knowledge into discrete sections. And actually, any adults listening to this certainly know that the world doesn't exist like that. That actually the world is a multifarious, complex place, and that actually our education needs to reflect that. So whilst we know that our students will sit a physics GCSE or they will sit a history GCSE, we can't just have our teaching be to that subject. We've got to find out where are the locations where, just like those old Venn diagrams that you used to look at in a maths lesson, where are the places that the subjects overlap? What are the ways in which we can have a little bit of history overlapping with a little bit of geography, or a little bit of physics overlapping with a little bit of biology? And have those teachers work together Have those teachers work together on that to plan together, so that it isn't just individual 55-minute servings, single servings of subject.
So that's a really comprehensive explanation. Thank you, Adam. Is there anything that Mark or Andrew would want to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's about, as a teacher and it's about a school, is what's our purpose? What's your purpose? What are you setting about to achieve? I mean, most schools you'll go to and they have a mission statement, and you'll have a mission statement in your handbook, and that's kind of where it stays. What we've tried to do is actually think about the concept of understanding by design. Where do you want students to be at the end? And you work backwards, in our case, right down to the prep school. So in languages, how we did that is we thought, well, what are the big ideas? Why is languages important? Especially important for us in the UK, where English is a real lingua franca. We then distilled those down into 5 key strands. And for us, that was kind of communication, language and literacy, global communities, culture, and making connections. So all of those created certain questions that in every single topic that we cover, we then seek to address. So how does studying about people's holidays, what's the connection with that with culture? And interestingly, I say this because we had an introduction to the new GCSE a couple of weeks ago, and it was actually very much now the way the exam boards are going, they're actually trying to think about the cultural impact, and they're trying to think about how we train people to be communicators.
And Andrew, what's your take from the younger end of the school?
I think at the prep school, we've been working closely with our colleagues in respective subject areas. And I think that level of curriculum conversation has been really beneficial. It's essentially, the Brilliance Curriculum is a through-school curriculum that maps the progress that students make from the start through their course on their Millfield journey. And in the last 3 years, we've been working very closely with the senior school, whether it's through collaborations, meetings. We've created time, I think, to establish good lines of communication and constantly working to refine and review. I think the Brilliance Curriculum is something that we're always tinkering with. We're trying to develop further and further and make it, Adam, as you said, to make it really relevant to our students.
So how does that play out in practice? So if we start with years 7 and 8 down at the prep school, Andrew, what does it look like in the classroom to be delivering the Brilliance Curriculum? And then perhaps we can kind of move up to the higher end of the school. Okay,
so I think in practice the Brilliance Curriculum really makes us as teachers think really carefully about the construction of our curriculum, and then give students also the sort of key milestones for where that learning is going, so they have a real sense of meaning and purpose to what they're doing. I think it's also about fostering a curiosity, a passion for the subject, and you hear that lots of subjects are trying to do that on a daily basis, but I think here we have the opportunity to really look at the interdisciplinary, to actually be able to find the art in language, to find the history and geography, to make those kind of connections and links, and making it really, really meaningful. And when we're developing that disciplinary knowledge, those substantive concepts, I think it's the added enrichment that the Brilliance Curriculum provides, so that we can speak to our senior colleagues and we can say, this is what we're doing, how can we support what you're doing, and how can you support us?
Okay, and in the senior school, Mark?
Well, I think it's trying to make students engage with the bigger philosophical questions that relate to your subject. And I think those are really important. You're not just doing something because it's on an exam spec. You're actually owning it. Like if you use a textbook, you're owning the textbook. So if you've decided that actually diversity is a really important part to demonstrate, and you see a textbook which doesn't show that diversity, you're able actually to get the students to engage with that. So it's more than just a set of concepts to be learnt. And I think one of the great things that Millfield's enabled us to do here is to actually develop teachers themselves. So we've every year we have a whole day off timetable where we're able to spend time as a department to tackle those big questions. I mean, how do we want our curriculum to look like? How do we want to teach it? How can we get in experts to fill us in with the latest research? And I think that's been extremely well received by teachers.
And Adam, can you give us some specific examples of where there's been curriculum cross-connection between subjects?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll build a little bit on what Mark said. I think that anybody who works in education, anybody who reads about education will know that the reforms that happened to GCSEs over the last, well, they started in many ways about 10 years ago, but that there's been an increasing amount of demands upon teachers to focus on basic regurgitation of knowledge in year 10 and 11. And that is a very difficult thing for us because it de-skills the young people, it de-skills the teachers, and we teach GCSEs here. We have a limited degree of choice, but what we can do is we can fight our corner and we can try and work to mitigate against that in some way. And I can give examples of how that's happened. So, for example, by doing lots of sustained face-to-face discussions between our heads of department, we discovered that, for example, in the maths GCSE, there's a demand that they do angles and trajectories. At the same time as history in year 9 is also teaching about medieval siege warfare. So actually what that means is there's a great and unusual opportunity for a degree of creativity there. Why not have the head of physics and the head of history together construct some medieval trebuchets in miniature, you understand, and then have discussions about the angle of flight and projectile missiles, but also to think about it from a medieval siegeware point of view. And we did that in a large space, and it was tremendous amounts of fun. And actually, let's be honest, that kind of experience makes the knowledge more sticky in the mind of the young people than if they'd have done that as 2 discrete individual lessons. But actually we also think about expertise of teachers. So in the A-level, if you're doing product design, there's quite a lot about working with plastics. Now our head of product design is amazing, but he's not an industrial chemist. But we have chemistry teachers who have that level of expertise. So why not, and we did this, have some of those lessons in the product design A-level that are about plastics take place in a chemistry classroom where they're actually doing the extraction of the material and they're doing the experiment in front of the eyes of the product design teachers. And I was there to watch that lesson, to do an observation, and it was absolutely wonderful because the students were out of their normal classroom. They weren't in the product design labs, they were in a chemistry lab. They were being talked to by a chemistry teacher who was explaining what plastics were as she was making them, which was absolutely wonderful. And I got a final example from my own class. I think if somebody's an undergraduate doing philosophy, the first thing that they will be asked to do probably will be to engage with a piece of real philosophical writing, and almost always will be Descartes' Meditations, which is a kind of standard entry text. Granted, it's written in the 17th century, but it's a great introduction to thinking philosophically. This year, for the first year, I actually used that text with the year 9 class. I got a really high achieving year 9 class, and we were talking about basically a kind of introduction to epistemology. What's true, what's false, how do we know this, how do we know the things that we know. And I got a translation, and I made that translation myself friendlier to year 9s, and I distributed the text, and we had an opportunity to think about, well, what does he mean? What's he saying? And it was a really nice lesson. I'd never felt, if you like, the bravery to do that before. But all of the thinking about the Brilliance Curriculum and all of the thinking about trying to see vertically up through the disciplines gave me the confidence to just get that text out, sit down with the year 9s and talk it through. And I think we got really something significant out of that. And if they go on to do A-level philosophy, then they'll see it again. And if they go on to do a philosophy at degree level, they'll see it again. And that was really exciting.
And you use the term there, stickiness, which is a great word to use when describing to the students about how they're going to learn and how they're going to remember things. And what do you mean by stickiness? What is it that we were trying to achieve in the classroom?
Yeah, that's a good question, because stickiness would mean, superficially, it would mean the ability to create recall, right? That's what we would think that it meant. So, taken superficially, what I seem to be saying is, if we do it like this, then a kid has a better chance of being able to regurgitate it correctly in an exam hall. And I do mean that, but I don't only mean that, because what I mean by stickiness is also can understand the place of something in the webs of knowledge that surround it. Because actually, we don't want young people here at Millfield just to be able to pass an exam or just to be able to retain a single discrete quantum of knowledge. We need them to be able to contextualize it and to see how it links and to see the meanings that it has. And actually that really is about true intelligence or true understanding, is knowledge in its original context or in a meaningful context. And doing it in a cross-disciplinary way is much more likely to create that.
So that's really, really interesting. So how do we know that the students, that they understand what the Brilliance Curriculum is? Have you had feedback from them on lessons on where we're putting two subjects together?
We have done some surveys to ask the students about what they found memorable about their lessons. We haven't necessarily explained what the Brilliance Curriculum is per se, but we've made sure that they understand it through the sea change in what they've been taught. And the surveys were showing that some of them, so what was your most memorable languages lesson? And they were able to pinpoint the stuff that we particularly put in there. And we asked them to say why it was memorable. Also, what's been a really great project for the departments to do is the curriculum maps. So if you go into any department, you will be able to see on the wall where they start off in year 7 and where that will lead them at the end of their Millfield journey and the questions that they have to tackle.
And how do they find that at the prep school? Have they looked at those curriculum journeys?
We've really worked very hard on sort of developing the curriculum as a learning journey across our department areas, and then finding the common themes and threads that exist within those department areas. So we're doing more sort of collaborative. I've got an example here if I can show you.
Yeah. Describe away.
Yeah, if I describe away, I'm just going to roll this out. This is a Brilliance Curriculum project, and we actually called it a Brilliance Curriculum project with Year 7. And this was a single class, and the students were at that time studying the Norman Conquest. And I had this idea of encouraging more art history into lessons. So the students were asked to create their own interpretation. And we were studying the Bayeux Tapestry and the history of the Bayeux Tapestry. And as you can see, if I describe what I can see, a very bright roll. It's very much a student's interpretation of the moment where William and the Normans crossed the Channel to Pevensey, and the students were learning this in history, and they were completing this in art, and then the teachers swapped classrooms. So the students saw that we were following each other and following the learner, and the students then started to, once they'd become more and more expert, to add more detail into the artwork based upon the history. And then actually more nuanced answers came from history after doing the art. So they wanted to know more. And I think one of the great things about the Brilliance Curriculum is it gives these avenues for nuance and more sophisticated answers. And hence, here we have, like the Bayeux Tapestry itself, it's not quite finished, but it's about 12 or 13 students' work in front of us at different stages in time.
There's a beautiful, colourful piece of work in front of us here. It looks amazing. Some very talented artists. Perhaps they could finish it, or will they never finish
maybe
it?
Next year.
So, when the Brilliance Curriculum was embedded across the whole school, was it done slightly differently at the prep school to how it was done at the senior school? And how's that going to work when they move up and transition through?
I think there's been more similarities.
Yeah.
I really do. I think one of the really nice things was that we were all together at the very launch of the Brilliance Curriculum, and we've continued those conversations. And it's been very, at times, quite organic, and certainly in the Humanities department, we have regular visits, team talks, opportunities for collaboration. Just yesterday, the History department did a joint trip to a history festival. And that kind of level of collaboration began, I think, with the inception of the Brilliance Curriculum.
Fantastic. And so we've already touched on this a bit. So some criticisms of the current education system centre around the concept that students are just learning curriculum content from the textbooks just to pass an exam. So how will the Brilliance Curriculum prevent that same process occurring at Millfield?
I think we like I've said, we can probably really only mitigate against it. We don't want our young people not to sit their examinations. We don't want them not to excel at their examinations. Far from it. But Mark has put it really nicely. What we need to do is think about what's our purpose. Like, I don't want to build a student whose only purpose is to sit an exam at Millfield and to get a fantastic grade. What I want them to do is to be curious about the past, or about language, or about angles, or about trajectories of ballistic missiles, or I want to inculcate within them and to create a school curriculum that can do this, a love of learning and a love of academic endeavour and a love of curiosity for its own sake. And we can enliven our lessons and our curricula and the entire time that a young person spends here in so many different ways, do the application of really careful thinking about the design of what we teach, when and how.
And how have you seen the staff body embrace the Brilliance Curriculum? Have teachers become more engaged in a subject that perhaps they've been teaching for a long time and they've been teaching the same thing?
I think no one goes into teaching because they want to teach a particular exam board for GCSE. That's not why you're going to teaching, and I think, but that's what teaching has become for many people. And you say to them, what's your curriculum? And they say, well, we study X exam board for GCSE and we use these textbooks, as though that's an answer to the question. And I think if the Brilliance Curriculum has done nothing else, it's helped teachers re-connect with exactly why they've gone into teaching, which is for most teachers, I would say, was to inspire students to take that interest in their subject as much as they have.
And how do you think the Brilliance Curriculum is going to benefit our students once they've moved on from Millfield? How's it going to help them with maybe choosing their university courses, if that's what they go on to do, or the different pathways that they can take after sixth form?
I think for our subject particularly, I mean, we've looked backwards from university and we've tried to think, well, look, what are the skills you would need as an undergraduate? Well, you need to be able to communicate and give presentations and do research. And we've tried to make sure we've put within our courses opportunities for students to develop that. And not just in the sixth form, by which stage actually it's arguably a bit late, but we've done that right from the beginning. So that when the students get to the upper sixth, they're already feeling confident with those skills.
And with the curriculum journeys that have been designed, are you finding that the younger students are looking ahead and being excited about what's coming when they move up to the senior school?
I think one of the things that's come through loud and clear is that students recognise that what they're doing, the content, the history that they've been studying my subject, it's been very carefully constructed by more than just one person. That there is other teachers, future teachers that they'll have at the senior school who have had input into this. And I think that makes quite a special learning journey for them, because they realise then that actually what they're doing here is they're building not just the interdisciplinary, but they're also building on substantive concepts that we want to see them, in year 9 and GCSE and hopefully A-level developing. So it's much more of a looking at the longer picture.
It's interesting what you say about interdisciplinary studies, and Adam talked about it earlier about breaking down the barriers between subjects that the Victorians sort of very keen to build. And there's a great book out at the moment it's called Range by David Epstein, and he's talking about how hyper-specialisation, which is essentially what we do a lot in the UK, you do 3 A-levels, is really limiting. And the more research you do at university, you kind of research yourself into a corner, and to get a PhD you have to actually choose something that no one else has studied. And this has led to people at Harvard, they're incapable doctors and of interpreting sort of basic logic. So actually, in a lot of these big universities now, there's a big sort of trend to do this interdisciplinary training, and to make sure, because ultimately it's the generalists that end up making the breakthroughs, because they're able to sort of straddle different fields.
So where are we going with the Brilliance Curriculum in the future? What are the next steps?
I think one of the things that we've thought about a huge amount up until now is about content and design, but we also want to think about pedagogy. So we want to think about, okay, we've thought about what's being taught, we've thought about when, and we've thought about, but we need to consider how. And next year we'll see us really start to push on what we call oracy. So that's not simply talking, but it's about how do we develop in the young people who sit in our classrooms a desire to be able to discuss concepts, to listen to their peers discussing concepts, to be able to just talk and think about ideas verbally. And that's actually a really critical skill today. It's something, for example, that AI can't mimic. So it's a real human skill. So therefore it's one that will be important for the young people in the years to come. And it isn't just the case of saying to our young people, right, go and talk about that, or go and give a presentation on that. We actually need to teach these skills in many ways, because maybe young people who are watching a lot of things or looking at screens a lot of the time, they don't necessarily have a native set of discursive skills upon which they can draw to do those sorts of things successfully. So we're going to start to really have a huge emphasis in the years to come on the skills of speaking, listening, discussing, and doing all of those with a purpose. So a purposeful approach to oracy and thinking.
And is that something that you'll be carrying down to the prep years as well?
I absolutely think it's something that we need to build in much earlier, and I believe we are doing that. There are opportunities. Certainly this year we've had talks. The History and Politics Conference came down to the prep school. We did a collaborative piece of work. We had year sevens who were listening to public historians and delivering presentations and asking good questions. And I think more opportunities of that. I think one of the things that we really hope that students will get is that they'll feel like, oh, we're doing that earlier. We're not doing that, in year 9 or year 10. We can actually appreciate using all sorts of things through oracy that actually we haven't tried before. And I think maybe earlier in their time at Millfield is something that we can offer for them.
Fantastic. So let's move on to the final question, which is a question we ask at the end of all of our podcasts. So could each of you give me one main takeaway for our listeners about the Brilliance Curriculum at Millfield and Millfield Prep? What would that be?
I think that for me, what the Brilliance Curriculum is about saying to parents, Millfield's absolute commitment to the highest level of academic excellence is not solely designed around exams, nor is it designed to stop the second that your child puts down their pen on their final exam. It is a serious commitment to designing and delivering a curriculum which is intended to inculcate a lifelong love of learning for its own sake, and a commitment to understanding individual pieces of knowledge in their place, and therefore to understand their wider significance.
And Mark, what would yours be?
I think it's about encouraging teachers and students to come to a place like this to learn and to be curious about the world. We're in the middle of Somerset, rural Somerset, and it can be a bit of a bubble here. And I think we want to train people that go beyond Millfield into their local communities, into their local world, and they show real curiosity about the world, and they're looking to make connections, not just between the courses they study, but actually between different people as well.
And Andrew, what would yours be?
I have to agree, certainly agree, Adam, with your points on Brilliance Curriculum. I think just to add more, that the students know precisely where their learning journey is going, that they know and appreciate how careful we have sort of constructed and designed the curriculum for them, and for staff to allow us to talk about the curriculum together, just as we've done here.
Fantastic. Thank you to all three of you for giving up your time this afternoon. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of the Millfield Way podcast in conversation with Dr. Adam Gutteridge, Mark Nash and Andrew Sweet. Thank you and goodbye.